Rebecca Jez, and I am an assistant professor in the Department of Learning and Teaching in the School of Leadership and Education Sciences. And we are really excited to be, there we go. We're really excited to have you join us today for our second event this fall in the Black Lives Matter and Beyond Social Justice and Advocacy series. This series has been going on since its inception in June 2020, after the televised murder of George Floyd and the coverage around Breonna Taylor, when the Department of Learning and Teaching faculty, Dr. Joseph Lathan, who's also here on the call, and I rallied our students in the PhD in Education for Social Justice, and also the master's students in our program, to help us craft a solidarity statement, co-create the solidarity statement, and then bring the solidarity statement to life through our actions, which became this series. We are now grant funded, so thank you, USD, for supporting this work. And we're just really excited to be able to continue to bring community together so that we can really live out social justice. I had a conversation with Lisa Delpit back in February, and she talked about moving from nouns to verbs. And I believe that this work that we're doing here today and with all of our events have really done that. We're not just talking about what action can happen, but we're really trying to move that into making an impact in our community. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us to talk about racism and professionalism, trends, experiences, and strategies for addressing bias and discrimination. Marcus, do you want to go to the next slide and take over?
All right, so hello everybody. Once again, my name is Marcus Spencer. I'm this year's, or one of this year's, graduate assistants for #BLM, the initiative. And just a little bit about me. I'm from Moreno Valley, California. I kind of got interested in this work just from diversity work, working with young groups of children in summer camp programs, and it really kind of gravitated me towards wanting to represent a community of people that, represent our world. And that's how I got involved in really, being passionate about this line of work and standing up and, having a voice, understanding strategies for combating racism and all the things that we strategize here at #BLM to, try and vocalize and produce and make sure everybody hears us. So right now, I'm just going to talk a little bit about our land acknowledgement and just take the time to kind of recognize that we are on indigenous land, and we want to recognize what that means. A lot of these structures that, that we're a part of today, obviously were, once conquering structures that ruled over people in obstructive ways. And so we just want to take the time to pay our respects and really be mindful of, without the sacrifices made, unfortunately by many people, from not just Kumeyaay, but other indigenous tribes as well, that we're able to do this work along the lines of diversity and inclusion today. And we want to be, just mindful and, be aware that, it took something to get to where we are right now. So, and then this is just a little bit, you can read it to yourself or, however, whenever you get the time, but it's a little bit of a statement that kind of reflects what I just talked about a little bit. Okay, thank you guys. And then I'm going to move on to our solidarity statement. And I believe, is somebody reading this or is me reading this? I can't remember. Okay, all right, so here at #BLM, we have a solidarity statement, and it's a little bit more than a call to action. It really just is a message that we kind of use to represent, again, just like overall the body of work that we're trying to represent, and just a little bit about, the people that that are a part of it, and, what the movement is really seeking after. So we are called to act and defend the rights and liberties of Black, Indigenous, and people of color, including the marginalized due to their sexual orientation, differing abilities, and gender identities. These often underheard voices who live within the American tapestry exist in collective, oppressive, and often excluded from full participation as citizens in our democracy. They have been profiled, detained, and denied their rights. Yeah, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory. It really just talks about how it doesn't matter where you're from or, what minority group you represent or you're a part of. This work should mean something to you if you represent any of these groups, because you know what it feels like to not have a fully represented voice and to not have advocations on your behalf, and really, seeking that better lifestyle and inclusion for all. So for today's agenda, we've kind of already started the welcome. Hopefully you felt welcome into the Zoom. That's the environment we try to create. I just went over the solidarity statement and the land acknowledgement. I don't know if you know or not, but we have 3 lovely panel speakers today. They're definitely on the call and they have some expertise that they're going to be bringing. And so we hope you're all ears for what they have to say. After our panel session, it'll be the breakout session, and we'll have some facilitators run those discussions. We'll have some good sharing, and hopefully we'll make some good connections to everybody's own backgrounds and in today's topics. And then we'll bring it back together for a whole group share out. We'll share whatever resources we have of interest to you. Hopefully those are something that falls into whatever field you're in, to try and connect you to different communities and just different lines of work, all kind of geared around the same topics. And then lastly, to wrap up this evening, we're going to have closing remarks, and that'll be today. So getting right into it.
Actually, before we do the discussion norms, we're going to go into the panelist. So,
okay.
So you hit the
go.
Second, I think, yeah, next, and after that, one more.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. So I'm going to be introducing the panel. We'll be talking, and of course, I will let them take the shine and the spotlight so they can talk about the amazing work that they do in their careers, in their daily lives, volunteer work. So I'm just excited that they're here and willing to spend some time with us. So first off, we have Dr. Bree. She has her name is Bree, so I'm going to say Dr. Briony DuBose. She is here and I'm going to let them go more into their background, but she is part of University of San Diego. She is a lecturer, as it says here, in the Doctor of Nursing Practice program for Health Policy Analysis and Reflective Practice. She does have her PhD as well, but I'll let her talk a little bit more about that. If we can go to the next, please. We're just going to introduce the panel. We have Marshall Goodman. He is my friend and colleague. Marshall actually is a professor at Cal State Long Beach, but he does a lot of work. He is an elected official, as I am. He's a council member in La Habra, but he does a lot of exciting work. He has a lot of respect. I always say I respect him specifically because of the work that he does between housing, and we'll let him do a lot more talking, and we'll ask some questions on the work that he does. On a side note, I'm a little happy because I'll be on a committee with him this year, and we'll be tackling this problem of housing together. So I'm excited to hear him. And you can go to the next, please. And then we have Dr. Jessica Williams. She has told me to call her Jessica, but I'm going to call her Dr. Williams today, just right for right now. But as it says here, she's a Black feminist artist, educator, dedicated to authentic connection as a means to empowerment. As I go down, she's a New York Times best-selling anthology, You Are Your Best Thing, Vulnerability, Shame, and the Black Experience. So I'm going to jump into some questions here, and we'll hear the background from our panelists. So I'll start, and I'll just start with the first person that I have on my screen here, which is Marshall here. So Marshall, if you can come off mute, introduce yourself, give us a little personal story about any experiences you have or seeing someone else experience racism in professional spaces. You can just give us a little background too. That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Yes, as Richard said, my name is Marshall Goodman. I am a council member in the city of La Palma, actually. La Habra is a great city, and I'm very close friends with the council member there, Rose Esperanza, and we sit on a board together for the League of California Cities Orange County Division. But yes, I can't stake claim to their city. Have to put it right and say that I am from the city of La Palma. Also part-time lecturer, can't claim the name of professor just yet, but I'm a part-time lecturer of public policy at California State University, Long Beach. Graduated there with an Africana Studies degree, which I'm very proud of. A minor in entrepreneurship, which focused on business development in economic enclaves. And, you know, we delved into a lot of the communities in Long Beach that, you know, were ethnic-based enclaves. And the one that I studied was Cambodia Town, and we picked a restaurant and helped them, you know, develop their business and so on. So I've been submerged in, you know, this dynamic of race and, of course, being Black in diaspora, which is my major, Africana Studies. And my master's degree, public administration, and the focus there was in urban affairs, and the focus within urban affairs is, you know, race and equity policy and things like that. So I'm honored to be on this panel. And another thing, I love seeing Angela Davis on the first slide there. There was a picture of the great Angela Davis, and she's such an important figure in the struggle for universal freedom. As far as a personal story regarding a scenario where I witnessed or experienced racism, I think I would need to go into my professional life, which is for the past 35 years, I've been a performing artist. I'm a musician. I play drums and toured and was a member of a couple of bands. One of them was Sublime. Another was the Long Beach Sub All-Stars. Both bands are from the city of Long Beach. Play alternative, reggae, hip hop mixture style of music. So being on the road with a band like that, which is skate and surf mostly, you know, I brought the hip hop component to the band, was the kid from the other side of the tracks that joined up with these folks from Naples and Belmont Shore, which are some well-off places in Long Beach. And, you know, being on tour with a group of folks like that, although we were best of friends, there tended to be this casual dialogue that went on with the prominently European American, but also some, you know, Latin American folks in the mix too. But they would sway toward the European American dialogue, which kind of downed everybody, you know, including Polish folks. You know, everybody was going to get chastised at one time or another. And so what I tended to do when those situations came up and there was some locker room talk happening or something like that, you know, I wouldn't really fly off the handle or anything, but I would engage them in a conversation and kind of ask further what they mean, or, you know, because when you fly off the handle, what happens with the locker room talk environment, what I've experienced with this is they'll come in on you more. Like they come at you more with the same type of talk and really identify you as sensitive, or, you know, you need to toughen up, and or we're just joking, you know, those types of things. So this banter is taken very lightly, and it's poured on heavy, typically. You know, the more the better. The more cheeky you can be, the more you don't mean it. You know, the more clever you're being, or something of that sort. So it's all just kind of disarmed. You know, that's what they're trying to do. But in reality, what I felt happens is there's just this lack of awareness of the true picture. They're just minimizing these issues. They feel like they're lightening them and softening the blow or something of that sort. But my experience with it has been, no, you guys don't understand the capacity of these things you're joking about, and the histories of these things of Polish people and Black people, or, people who are coming to a new land for freedom because there's troubles over there. You just kind of minimize everything by calling somebody a word or saying, oh, I don't mean anything by that. I got all kinds of friends who are all kinds of things. So that, in all honesty, has been my experience that impacted me the most. The council scenario, there's a touch of it. Richard can relate to this, where there aren't many electeds in Orange County, so that are Black, and there are many that are Latino. We have, Santa Ana and different cities that have a large Latino representation, so they were, able to organize and get elected, to councils. However, the Black electeds, I think at one time were 3, maybe now there's about 5 or 6. Richard, I don't know if you know the number exactly. I know Rhonda in Huntington Beach, Los Alamitos. But although I didn't experience any racism, it's kind of just, you kind of see the lack of representation there. There are a good amount of African Americans in Orange County, not as many as the European Americans. However, the amount of African Americans that are in Orange County, I don't think are represented on councils. There should be a lot more elected. And, no racism in full motion there, but you can see that there's a tendency, and there has been a tendency in Orange County to take certain directions. And one small example I'll give you was the covenants that used to go on the deeds in Orange County. And they're still there. A buddy of mine just bought a house in unincorporated Orange County, and on his deed, there was a covenant that said, do not sell this property to anyone that is not of the Caucasian race. So that includes, Asian American, Latin American, African American, and the whole 9. But it's still kind of this racism that goes on. So with that, I mean, I don't know how much time I have, but I'm more than willing to continue. I'll stop there for now. And those are kind of the 2 dynamics that I've experienced racism.
All right, thanks for sharing. All right, I'll go to the next on my screen is Dr. DuBose. So if you could please unmute, and if you still need this, if you need the question, it's just an introduction, personal story, your experience, or just your work that you do with racism in professional spaces.
Yeah, thank you so much. So my name is Dr. Briony DuBose. I'm a registered nurse and also a Lean Six Sigma Black Belt for a healthcare organization here in San Diego, and adjunct faculty in the School of Nursing, and have the opportunity to teach reflective practice, health policy analysis, epidemiology, strategic planning, all in the DNP program. Health policy is a huge opportunity for me to be able to teach, because often as nurses, we are improving and trying to support health at the bedside, at the hospital, or the clinic level. But those health outcomes are so heavily influenced by social determinants of health, where people live, where people work, racist policies, that we need to raise the acumen of our healthcare professionals to look beyond the bedside and beyond almost social determinants of health, and start learning the tools and the skills to be able to influence health policy, which will then, move further upstream, which influences social determinants of health and then health outcomes. And in health policy, I'm able to help build that skill and knowledge and acumen for the nurses. And then reflective practice, really reflect on practice and after practice on your interactions with your patients, and how your lens and your gaze influences your interactions with them. And very, kind of gently challenge their way of thinking of the way things are in healthcare. One example I like to share is, it's pretty notorious and well known that primary care physicians, both nurse practitioners and physicians, are the least paid medical profession of the group, compared to, neuroscientists and cardiac surgeons. Our primary care physicians are paid the least. even though they have, one of the largest influence on our quality of health. And one reason for that is, to help students be aware that there's a racist undertone to why that occurs, because when the Flexner Report came out in 1910 and shut down a significant number of colleges, when they were reopened for Black medical students to rejoin, they were limited to just primary care. And so you have to kind of be willing to lift your gaze a little bit and see how things that happened 100 years ago are still impactful today. And when I think of probably one of the most impactful situations in my nursing career, I've been a nurse for quite many times. And when I was still in clinical practice, I worked in the ER. So I spent, almost 16 years as a registered nurse in the emergency department, both here in San Diego and also Arizona. And several decades ago, when I was a brand new nursing student, on one of my first rotations, I was getting a report with my preceptor in the morning, and she was getting report from the night shift nurse, who was explaining that this gentleman, mid-40s, had an accident the day prior and had a leg fracture. And she used the term Hispanic panic, that he had just been out of control all night, that they had been medicating him and remedicating him, and used kind of disparaging remarks, inferring that maybe he was drug seeking. They did not have a translator, so he was not able to communicate for that whole evening. And luckily, there was a translator available in the morning, and we were able to quickly determine what the root cause of his pain was. And he had a medical emergency called compartment syndrome, which is what happens when you have an injury and the swelling in a confined space gets too great, and it causes extreme pain. And can be, somebody could lose an appendage or suffer from nerve damage. And at that moment, I thought, this person was probably treated differently based off of the color of his skin and his primary language. And it makes my eyes get watery now thinking about it, because it was an existential crisis for me at the time of, have I chosen the wrong profession? Do I want to be in a profession that will treat people differently? And it caused me to look more critically at my education in nursing and in healthcare from that moment on. Why was my textbook very Eurocentric? Why was everything focused around, the European model of a diet and communication strategies and family structure? Why was no other lens or viewpoint included into it? So that was really I was very fortunate that occurred very early on in my experience in nursing care, but it's still impactful today. And it's, I'm hopeful for the future, but we still have such disparities in health outcomes that really can only be attributed to race. So I'm still a nurse, and I'm still teaching, and I'm still trying to influence, so that way that never happens to another patient again.
Well, thank you for sharing. This work, it really never stops. But I will go on to Dr. Jessica Williams, aka Jessica, to jump in and again, if you can just tell us a little bit more about you, personal story about experiencing or seeing someone else experience racism in professional settings and spaces.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Jessica, and I actually work full-time as a leadership coach after 15 or so years in higher education. So I left higher ed last year, November. And part of the reason I left was racism. So this is great. We're going to get right into it. Not at my last job, but I think, I probably experienced racism. I know I experienced racism way before this moment, but professionally, I had never experienced it quite this way before. I had in a previous job. And, I'm from Atlanta, so I'll start by saying that. So I'm from Atlanta, grew up in a majority minority city. Sorry, the dogs are going crazy if you can hear them. But grew up in a majority minority city. So seeing Black people do everything from garbage to like the mayor, you know what I'm saying? Everything in between. Like it just wasn't uncommon for me. I had a major culture shock coming out to San Diego because where were the Black people? And specifically I kept asking, like, where's the Black, like, middle class? And I remember experiencing, like, getting followed at a Rouse in San Clemente. That was the first time that had happened. I was a grown up, I'm 27 years old, and I had someone follow me in a grocery store because I was Black and tell me that, I was like, is this real life? So some of these things, like, you hear about them, but they were happening to me super late in life, right? And so I could process them in a much different way than I would have if I had been feeling them, my whole life, I think. But because of that, I feel like when I have those moments, like I was kind of laughing when Marshall was talking and he was like, I just, I don't want to be the angry one. I'm like, oh, I'm the angry one. I want all the smoke. And it's one of the reasons why I've just become okay with calling myself a discomfort doula. And so much of my work, when I do leadership work, I tell white people in the room, if I'm doing my job right, you should not be comfortable. In fact, like, this is your time to sit in the discomfort. Like, that's your job right now. You'll be fine. It's an hour, or whatever it is. But I'm not censoring your feelings in this moment. And I just have to, even making kind of that warning statement is ick to me. But I recognize I have to name it, because if I don't, we're not going to get anywhere. So, I've done things like that because of the experience. Let me know what he's doing. But because of the experience that I had in one of my positions where I was a director, and it was, oh, you have your own office? Oh, the students come talk to you so much. They never, and that my students would want to meet in the coffee shop or in the student center or, just different places. And so I would go meet with them. And it was, oh, I noticed that you're in this big office, but you never meet with your students in it. I was like, what is this? I couldn't do anything right, and it was just little nitpicky things. I'm like, is it because I'm this? Is it because I'm that? And then I got to talk about professionalism, right? And I was like, okay, I got it. And it was one of those things where I felt, and so many people around me were like, you gotta fight the good fight, and you gotta stick up for yourself, and you gotta blah, blah, blah. And I would have, but also my dad was dying at the time. And my therapist was real frank with me and said, listen, you don't have the energetic bandwidth to be a freedom fighter today. I said, you're right, I don't. I gotta let this go. And so that's why I feel like I've now become so passionate about confronting it head on, because I know what it feels like to have to just sit it out. I know what it feels like to just to get fired on my day off for using my accommodations, right? This is my PTO. And you're calling me and telling me that perhaps I should just take my severance. And oh, by the way, you'll pay my rent through the rest of my teaching contract, which is really weird. So that should further let you know things are just a little off, So you have things that happen like that, and you look at, the full context of your life, and I said to myself, I can't fight this right now, but I'll be back, right? And so now in my practice, And a lot of times in my work, I'm teaching people how to bring their full selves into their professional spaces, whatever that means. So last year, I did a lot of work with Pride ERGs, um, Latinx student groups, Black student groups. How can I bring these very important pieces of myself to these spaces so that I can and make them feel more like harmonious, right? I don't want to have to clean myself up or speak a certain way or dress a certain way. I want to just feel like I can be myself. And what does that mean? And so it takes learning about, how to bring yourself forward, especially for a lot of people who've been taught that pieces of us aren't going to be valued in certain spaces. But it also takes learning how to choose and curate those spaces, right? And the people that you're around. So my work is really twofold of community and the spaces that you choose, but also that inner work and trying to make the two of those really get in alignment, which is real fun when you add like racism on top of all that.
Definitely. So I do know, and just as a side note, San Clemente is definitely, and Marshall, I know this too, is definitely a South Orange County city. My city is located in South Orange County. Marshall, I think you're a little further north than
All the way north. Yeah.
Yeah, you're way up there. So there is a difference in at least when we say it here in Aliso. We're a South Orange County city. North Orange County is a little bit more diverse. I would say diverse, a little bit more fun. You're here around these areas. It's a little bit more of the microaggressions that you all have kind of talked about in some areas. So let me ask this. Going back to you, Marshall, here. Talking about strategies for addressing microaggressions. I know as an elected official, I'm not sure if you've dealt with this personally, but what strategies have you used to address things like microaggression or bias or discrimination in your workplace? And actually, do you have hope for the future? And this, I actually want to hear the answer to that question, because I'm asked that quite a bit, being an elected official. Is there any hope for us? It's like, so I'm looking forward to that, to your answer on that. But yeah, take it on.
All right. Thank you. This is great. I mean, so far the information is being shared is wonderful. I love the dynamic involved in it, lots of different perspectives, which are crucial. One thing I wanted to intervene with is that, in a movement for a people, whatever it be, women's suffrage, Black freedom, there needs to be different dynamics and different approaches. And, Booker T. Washington and W.E.B. Du Bois showed how you have to have these different progressions from different angles. They didn't get along with each other because they were taking different approaches and thought the others was a little bit too this or a little bit too that. So the one thing, if I could say, any movement needs, the feminist movement had this issue too, is to come together in your movement. Booker T and W.E.B. in the end, would compromise and would see each other's place, but the passion that's involved in driving forward may cause a little bit of division. But one thing that any movement, any community who's trying to break free of oppression and find universal freedom just needs to make sure that the boundaries are limited, that there's an understanding there that everybody is taking an approach that may be necessary in the end. So the final part of my answer is going to be my approach of bridging gaps. That's my goal. But I'll start by answering and saying, I've gone from getting in physical fights with people. So in the band, when people would say things, I'm gonna be honest with you, in order to set the tone, I had to fight a couple people. That's just it. I mean, and it's because they called me a word directly. And I said, we're not gonna have that. This is what's gonna happen if you do that. This is one of the things that's gonna happen, because that's the world that they lived in. They lived in a very physical world. So if I didn't stand up for myself in that way, they would have never got the message. I could talk to them all I want to. So I had to start with that. And one thing that I talk to a lot of people about a lot of young men in the world, is we can go there. We can always fight. We can always pick up a gun. We can always show our physicality, because most of us have it based on the fact that we've had to survive. But my father taught me that it's always better to talk it through. See if you could use talking first. You can always do the other thing. That's always going to be there. And, you know, the Goodman family has been known for being a raucous bunch, but, you know, can you talk it through first? And so a couple of uncles told me that, yeah, your dad always wanted to talk. Yeah, he always wanted to talk. You know, we wanted to get busy. He always wanted to talk. But he talked us out of tough situations sometimes. And that's the key, is in my approach, is to bridge gaps. So have a dialogue. But in order to have a dialogue, what I've found when I'm meeting microaggressions at the council level and statewide on these committees that I'm serving on and these boards that I'm serving on, and happy to be serving with you on the housing committee. I just chaired that policy committee last year. And, you know, I've now joined the board of the statewide league, which is going to be great too. So it's going to be a good year next year for the organization we're serving. But in that space, microaggressions, first and foremost for me, it's grace, it's mercy, and it's empathy. Understanding that this person most likely doesn't have a background on things. If the person does have a background and they're trying to push an agenda of making me seem less than without knowing me and trying to identify or pull out stereotypes or anything that they can do, I acknowledge that. And I say, but you're still not going to win. Again, my father's approach to talking first, aggression second. So I try to play the wit game with them, you know, let them know I'm not bothered by it first and foremost, because you're not going to win with that. And then second of all, trying to inform, because awareness is key. Like Dr. DuBose said, you know, looking at other viewpoints, making sure that people in our space can at least be aware of these other viewpoints, first and foremost. Secondly, start considering them. So the land acknowledgements, which a lot of platforms do, and it's a wonderful thing in California that a lot are doing it. And I've seen it even on the East Coast. Some of the indigenous in New York have been acknowledged. But the acknowledgement is the first step. That brings the first step to awareness. The next dialogue, and then that deepens the awareness. And then the next is practice. So if you look at any movements in history, that's how they all started. The Niagara movement turned into the NAACP, turned into legal approaches, turned into the civil rights movement, the Black freedom movement, Black power movement, and so on. So with the Niagara movement to the NAACP, there were, you know, white Americans, Jewish mostly, joining efforts with Black people, African Americans, in order to have this dialogue. And dialogue is crucial for understanding and awareness. So that's the approach that I take with any microaggression. I play along, I don't do locker room talk. I show that I make them do a kind of step back, like, oh, it didn't sit right with you. I say, oh, you know, sitting's not what we're going to talk about. So I want to just know, and then I just dive into it with a little bit of wit, staying with them, and then try to show them by example. This is my approach, you know, multi-pronged approach to bringing awareness. My approach with these microaggressions is to persuade, is to get an audience with these knuckleheads, if you will. So, because that's how I consider anybody that tries those microaggressions on purpose. That was an example I gave you. I consider them knuckleheads, the troublemakers. And okay, you want to prove a point. Others just don't understand. That's where the empathy comes in. That's where the mercy and grace comes in, for sure. Is this person is just not aware. Like they grew up, you know, in the opposite scenario of my good doctor's background in Atlanta. They just never were around anyone but white folks. So you have to let them have that space and say, okay, you don't understand. So let me be your, not so much valet like in the enslaved era, but let me be your liaison to help you understand something. And I'm going to do it with grace, as our people always have, and help you understand and bring you some awareness. So that sharing, that dialogue, that's been my approach to dealing with microaggressions. And it's to bridge gaps. I have major hope for the future. This is why. We live in a society where we have laws of the land, and they're very, very impacted by unfairness, inequity, inhumane actions. It's littered with that. However, and I teach public policy, this is what I've talked to all of my students, and the majority of my students are Latinx. And it's mostly just to tell a story and to help them understand the history of things in our society. But we have this law of the land, and the founders were onto something. They witnessed the 7 Years' War. They witnessed the 100 Years' War over religion, over in Europe. They witnessed all these things. They studied Greece, Rome, but they also studied Egypt. So they were understanding of these dynamics of democracy, of society, getting along, trying not to kill each other. They were flawed. Most definitely they were flawed. And the laws that they made were flawed. But what they did and the understanding that made room for all that we have today as far as possibility and hope in this society is they made it amendable. They knew it was a living document. And that's always debated too, left and right. Right says it's not, left says it is, right says it's supposed to be what it is. You're not supposed to change it. But fact of the matter is we have 20-something amendments already, and we'll have more in the future. And that's the beauty of it. So we can look at things as they need to be looked at. And we have adjusted things. You know, we have the 13th Amendment and all of these things that went back and addressed. Is it done the best it should be? Absolutely not. But guess what we can do? We can change it. So we have this mobility in this society that, you know, is built on democracy, and it may not be fair. It may not be what it needs to be in the end. We may not be at that promised land, but we have come a long way. And being that we've come thus far, that we can be here talking about this openly and not have to hide in a basement somewhere or, you know, be in the North first before we can even start talking. Like, there's been progression. It hasn't been enough. There needs to be more. However, the fact that that process has taken place gives me hope that we'll be able to continue and move in that direction without being, you know, wiped out or something. We have a platform now with this concept of our Constitution and democracy. So I do have hope.
Okay.
And I do think that, you know, dialogue and awareness is at the foundation of building a better future.
All right. Thank you. So glad you have some hope, especially when the Supreme Court is debating things like affirmative action and talks of civil war, a lot of things going on. But thank you for sharing. Dr. DuBose, you know, nursing, health disparities. Do you see any hope in the future? And do you have any strategies to address any discrimination in the workplace?
Yeah. Is it okay if I answer in reverse order?
Sure.
Well, you know, I am a cisgendered white woman that lives in a bubble within a bubble within a bubble. I live within San Diego, within California, with the United States. So my lived experience will be very different than anybody else's. I will most likely never be followed in a store like Dr. Williams. I will most likely not have microaggressions. Mr. Goodman, as a talented, esteemed musician. But what I can do is I can understand my position and my lived experience and listen. And most importantly, hear other people's experiences and then act. And really, I think, culture is what happens when no one is looking. So when you're looking at and having a diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging in your place of employment, it's supporting a culture that will exist with an absence of policies and procedures, that the people in the room have a line drawn in the sand that this is accepted and this is not accepted, because what you permit, you promote. So it's, like Mr. Goodman shared, I'd like to think that I'm pretty good at my soft skills and having crucial conversations when need be. And sometimes it's, checking a colleague's lens on how they're treating a patient. Other times it's reframing how somebody states something. So for example, I just saw Hamilton on Tuesday down here in San Diego. It was amazing. And, just like you do during intermission, the couple next to my son and I said, "Oh, are you enjoying the show?" "Yes, it's wonderful." "Have you seen it before?" "No, we hadn't." I asked them, "Have you seen it before?" "Yes." And they said, "Yes." And the gentleman said, "This production is much more integrated than the previous one I saw. There's a lot more Black performers." And I don't know him. I'll probably never see this gentleman again. But it kind of struck me for a minute that of all the things to comment on, not the amazing voices, the talent on stage, the stage production, the set design, that he chose to say that in that moment. So now, and if he had been a colleague or a student, I probably would have had a different conversation with him on the power of words and how you choose to, share your thoughts with others. But instead, I tried to reframe, and I said, I've just been blown away by everyone. I cannot believe that's human beings are making those sounds with their mouths. Like, it's just unbelievable, and just, left it at that. But to Mr. Goodman's point, you have to know how to approach each situation, but never not address it at some level. And I do have a lot of hope. I have so much hope that our nursing students are being taught on a completely different level than the education that I received when I was in nursing school, and that we are challenging everyone to look at everything through a DEI lens. And I think that's what's really needed to drive lasting change, is to not become complacent and look at everything through a DEI lens. Like, for example, they were just talking, my organization implement, having one, like the model of having, instead of each hospital can provide all the services, maybe just one hospital should be the expert in neuro, and one hospital should be the expert in cardiology. And that's a care model that some hospital systems are looking at. But then I said, well, how would that improve or worsen disparities in care? Could every patient be able to travel 30 miles to receive top-notch care? Or would we be further creating disparities in health outcomes, because now we're creating even more so that your health is a consequences of your zip code? So just always keeping that in the forefront in the conversation, and really listen, hear, and act.
All right. Well, thank you for sharing. And I will say, on the side note, I know California's had a lot of healthcare policy debates, especially when it comes to single payer systems and making sure everyone's insured in the state, which might save some costs, but I know that's for a different day. But we'll go to Dr. Williams here. And Dr. Williams, same question. You have any strategies for addressing discrimination in the workplace, bias, and do you have hope for the future? Do you have hope for implementing in the future?
Yes, I have hope for the future. But I will say that, I want to say two things. I think that our success in the future moving forward, it really depends on our ability to be honest and to do hard work. The things like DEI work it's not that we can't do it gracefully. It absolutely can be done gracefully, right? And the reality is, we as a culture have not been trained to deal well with pain. We escape pain as soon as we can. We smoke it away, we drink it away, we dance it away, we gamble it away. We don't know how to sit with discomfort, with anxiety, with the unknown. And so, yes, I have hope, but I mean, it's not going to be cute. I'm okay with that, right? I'm perfectly happy in gray and discomfort. I think that my job as someone who practices leadership and someone who helps to train to people to, increase their leadership capacity, my sole goal is to increase their capacity to handle discomfort. They have to be able to say, how do I deal with the unknown? And then how can I help other people in my organization, in my constituency, in my community, in my family, my organization? Because honestly, like nobody knew January 2020, what March 2020 was going to bring, or what June 2020 was going to bring. And the fact of the matter is, so many of the systems that we thought would have been helpful to us failed us. And what we found was that we needed the most immediate people around us, right? I need my actual community, the people who live in my neighborhood. Supply chain issues are going crazy. So now I actually do have to go across the street and ask for a cup of sugar, right? Like these are the things. And so we find that in times of the unknown, we need people we can trust. I am not counting on the government. I was about to curse, y'all. I curse in my leadership practice, but I'm not counting on the government. I'm counting on my neighbors. I'm counting on my family. I'm counting on the people that I can shoot a text to and say, girl, I'm in trouble, or y'all, I need help. Because that's who was actually there for me when I'm going through all the things. And no shade to the government, right? I think that we should all be active participants in our political systems and processes. What I'm saying is, in the most immediate moment, I'm not thinking, what grant can I apply for, or what representative can I write a letter to? I'm thinking, I need to eat. I need to feel safe. Like I need to be heard. And that comes from a more immediate system of people, right? That's one thing. Hope is going to come with a lot of discomfort. We got to work for discomfort. The second thing is there's nothing micro about these aggressions, right? And so it's like nails on a chalkboard to me to even hear it called that. So what I do, because I feel that what happens is a lot of times people who hold minority or underrepresented identities get stuck with all the ick. And so I try to shift it out, right? So there's a microaggression that comes on me and I shift it and I say, what was your intention with that? I haven't directly done anything, right? But I'm asking, what was your intention? And yeah, I've been called that word, right? And I've said that exact phrase. What was your intention? Did you want my attention? Because you got it now. And it shuts things down. Because a lot of times it's I study shame and I study vulnerability and kind of like how to bring yourself into spaces, right? That's like my wheelhouse of leadership. And shame is a tool of white supremacy. A lot of the names that people refer to groups as, the N word, the F word, the R word, all the words we can't say, right? They're meant to invoke shame. And if I turn around and I say, hey, number one, you are not causing me an ounce of shame. I'm looking at you crazy. And I'm saying, you wanted my attention, you got it. What now? It diffuses something that is meant to be a spark in me. And so for me, that's the way that I kind of diffuse it really quickly. And I realize like everybody kind of finds their own way to this and through this work. For me, I hate conflict so much that I have to address it immediately. And also I'm a training therapist and like all these other things, right? So I've learned how to do it in a way that still feels like approach, like I'm not just like a raging lunatic all the time, but am I firm? Absolutely. You know what I'm saying? I'm not going to let something go and slip in a conversation. We'll circle, like I'm gonna circle back to it. I'm gonna say, so what did you mean by that? But I also, in the same vein, because I want to practice what I preach, I want to understand that when I bring up something, that I have a good intention, right? Because I don't want to call somebody out just to bring shame on them. That whole the master's tools will not destroy the master's house thing.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to call someone out. I'm trying to call someone in, right? It's like, no, I don't want you to try to call me a name to assert your dominion over me. Now, if you want to have a conversation with me, we can do that. But if you want to try to beat your chest and all that, we can do that too. It ain't gonna be cute, but it's like, I want to just make sure that we're communicating, right? And so that's kind of my intention around calling, like, I gotta call it out immediately. And because I don't want to be stuck with it. That's what happened with me June 2020. I felt like I was just stuck with all of this and I just got creative. And I started making workshops, I started making programs, and I was writing essays because I just had to get it out. And I needed somebody else to pick up the work. Like what Marshall was saying, like, we're not all meant to do the same kind of work, right? Some people are the people that are going to call the representatives and the senators, and they're going to do that. And some people are going to be the water people at the marches, and some people are going to be marching. And every single one of those roles is necessary. And so it's just about understanding, like, how am I going to show up in my most aligned way, right? My most empowered way. And how am I going to cultivate spaces that not only allow me to show up in my most empowered self, but encourage me to show up as my most empowered self. And so it's like, you can't just be afraid to, if you have that feeling of ick, or you have that feeling, like, you have to just act on it. But it's understanding what action is going to get you your intended outcome, right? It's about intentionally thinking that through and thinking about, with given the environment, given the person, how can I act in a way that's going to get me an intended outcome that's still in alignment with who I am as a person, who I want to show up as in the world, and that addresses, the situation at hand. So, I'm hopeful and ready to work.
All right. Well, thank you. Embracing discomfort. That is very powerful. Now, I know that we do have to move. We have to move on. But I just wanted to, again, stop and thank our panel. I wrote a ton of notes. There was lots of good information here that you all shared with us. We hope that we can have you all back. We'll see what we can get on the schedules, but I learned a lot. So thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for your time. And we are going to go into our breakout session. So I will definitely turn it over to Marcus here. We do have Dahlia and Yima here, I believe, to help with those. Yep, there she is, to help with those breakout groups and others as well. So thank you, panel. We appreciate it so much. And Marcus.
Yes, thank you to our amazing panelists. Just echoing off of the back of that, I learned a lot, just taking a few notes, paying attention to some good questions, and just seeing how, you have three very different backgrounds, but all with overlapping similarities in the work and the changes that you're seeking to accomplish. So it's just very inspiring to see. It doesn't really matter where you're coming from or what you do, that you can align yourself in that direction if you want to, and if you're really passionate about it. So really quickly, I'm just going to reshare the discussion norms with you guys. And
then Marcus, I'm going to go ahead and go through the discussion norms.
All right. Sounds good. Make sure. Oh my goodness.
Thanks, Marcus. Okay, so we just wanted, before we're going to be going into a breakout sessions to have more of a discussion and just to talk about some of the what we heard from our panelists. And we wanted to offer all of you a set of norms that we can agree on for the time that we have left here to spend time together today. And I'm going to just go over them. So one is listen with intentionality. and be okay with awkward silences. Even some of the speakers talked about discomfort and awkwardness and all of these things. And part of the work is definitely leaning into that discomfort, being okay with that, navigating through, working through it and being very intentional about it. So we ask that for all of you to do while we're in the breakout, to also speak your truth and, share authentic, I can never pronounce that word, authentically, and use I statements. Leading with I statements helps because this is coming from your own self-reflection. This is coming from your own perspective. And that way we're leading with the I. Respect confidentiality. I always say that to leave behind what we talk, like leave the discussion, but take with you some of the lessons that you get out of that discussion. And so we ask everybody to respect our stories and confidentiality. We talked again before about sharing experiences, leaning into discomfort. This really speaks to being a little vulnerable. With vulnerability, we can engage in change and different way of just existing and being present with one another. Be mindful of time so all can share. Some of us are talkers, I know I am, and some of us are more reflectors, or maybe people who listen, and so we want to make sure that we're allowing space for all of us, so that we can all share, whether it's through voice, through chat, or however you decide to share. Also recognize that this is unfinished work. I always say that we're on a journey, and this journey will continue even beyond the borders of the time that we have today. Recognize your communication style. All of us have very different ways of communicating, whether that is direct or indirect, or maybe expressive or not as expressive. And all of it, I always talk about communication styles in the manner of respecting and honoring each other's styles, right? You don't have to have my way of communicating, and vice versa. But I definitely want to open up myself to hear your way of engaging with me. And then also examining your own assumptions and perceptions. This is very important because sometimes we forget that a lot of our movement, the way we talk, our expressions, tie into some underlying assumptions that we have. I always say we lead with bias. It's very much our brain functions that way. And so it's always a self-check to make sure that you're examining your biases and your assumptions as you're moving along in this journey. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Do we want to get everybody kind of thumbs up on agreement for the discussion norms, or just?
Thank you so much. So I've now put us into 3 different breakout groups. We have one of the panelists in each one of the groups, and plus a few facilitators in there to keep the conversation moving. If we can we'll have just under 20 minutes. And so I'm going to ask you to, give an introduction. And, then these are some guiding questions. You do not have to go over each one of these, but, we just wanted to create a space for everyone to talk about their lived experience, their healing, and their hope. And then when we come back together, we'll just have probably 2 minutes for each group to share, 2 minutes total for all of the groups to share out, and kind of share some of the powerful points that came up as you were all in your groups. So I'm going to open up the rooms now, and I will be popping in to just kind of see how everyone's doing. But we're going to come back together as a whole group at about 5.
Yes, Jessica. That's what I was saying before we got cut off.
I tell you,
yes.
This is the worst part of facilitating these things, is knowing that these discussions are going on. And so we have thought about changing these to 2 hours because we really get into the heart of it, and then we have to come back. But without further ado, could we maybe have whoever's going to share out about the different groups share out? Maybe we can start with Jessica's, the breakout group with Jessica in it.
Take it away, Nick. Oh, you're on mute.
Goodness, I'm acting like a baby boomer genuinely with my technology. Apologies. And no disrespect. No, we all the discussion was well. We all just talked about how these conversations are great, but we do need to think of a unique way to have conversations with people outside of the ones who want to join and discuss things such as racism, who were willing to join this group today, right? So it's a blessing. It's always a blessing for us, always for like-minded people to get in a room together and brainstorm ideas. But our group was talking about how we have to be intentional in expanding that group to people who are not like-minded and people who are not trying to hear what we have to say, because essentially that's how change is going to start. We have to start changing people's minds. So we also talked about how right now the battle is a lot more spiritual and definitely in the mind. Like, obviously, all of us are sitting here free. No one's in shackles. However, depending on our culture, where you're raised, nurture, environment, you are definitely, there's a lot of us who still aren't free. So just we talked about how to just have those conversations, and so people can even see what's going on, because sometimes things are happening to people and they don't know because we're just so used to it. It's like the elephant concept. The baby elephant, when it's a child, of course, is tied by the chain. By the chain. When it gets older, it's by a rope and can leave. It doesn't think it can. So our community's in that chokehold right now. So we just discussed brainstorm ways on how to get it out of our community so we can actually have action. Because once again, these conversations are cool, but these conversations are with like-minded individuals, and we need those people who are not so like-minded.
Love that. All right. Marshall's group, someone share out?
We didn't get to to identify who was going to share out. So I can share a couple ideas, and then maybe I'll popcorn somebody else. But I think some of the concepts that were coming up were around like how a lot of the things that were being talked about today really feel like it's like this it's like an invisible ink of messages that's around us, and we feel it and we know it, and we can see it, but not necessarily everybody does. And so and there's also an expectation that you should respond a certain way to these messages. And people were identifying that, what the panelists were sharing was really helpful, because it helped them think about another way to respond that didn't just acquiesce to this messaging, right? That kind of keeps you in this strangleholded behavior, when you're in certain settings, because these expectations that you should behave in these certain ways that are not yours, right? They're not your way of expressing yourself, or they're not your way of addressing things, but you're expected to kind of do it in this way. So yeah, and we're kind of going around each sharing our own like personal like reality. And I think people were sharing how that stranglehold showed up for them in their lives. I don't know if anyone else in the group, because I don't want to be the only one speaking for the group, but anyone else in the group like to like kind of pull off some of those things that we talked about?
Well, that was fantastic. And then we have Bree's group.
Sure. I'll share a little bit about what we talked about. So yeah, a lot of our group discussion was just around personal experiences with microaggressions and just how we kind of handled it in the moment. We talked a lot about just sitting with that level of discomfort and really kind of encouraging that. I think a lot of us will, could probably say we probably identify as maybe, more passive aggressive, or you're not necessarily the action first type of person. So to kind of encourage that level of discomfort and to be able to just kind of sit in it and acknowledge that, that yes, it's going to be a conversation that's going to kind of rub people the wrong way, or but yes, it's also something that needs to be said. And yeah, that was really just what we talked about. I don't know if I'm kind of missing anything, but if anybody else from the group wants to add on to that, please feel free. But yeah, we really talked about just like microaggressions, managing solutions to that type of, those personal encounters. And then, how do you see yourself combating it in different settings as well? We just kind of touching on the points of like, how the three different speakers really come from just three immensely different backgrounds. I thought that was a really strong point to go with. Like, it doesn't matter like where you're fighting racism at, but it matters that you are fighting racism, that you are taking a stance. And then also just touching off that point that you are, bringing up these important issues to people who aren't in your community of like-mindedness, because that's really who we're trying to reach out to, and trying to change some of those ideals, their ideals. So that was just a little bit about what we had talked about. Yeah.
Well, thank you all so much. A lot of this work when we were planning what events we were going to have this year, a lot of this was centered on the misconceptions around critical race theory. And so today's event really highlighted, critical race theory as being those disparities and inequities around healthcare, around access to good medical care, respect around your own body, and politics and housing and access to education, and how to have these conversations and bring awareness, that journey from awareness to actual action. I really appreciated the idea of bringing the full self to these different conversations, that we all have our lived experiences and we're witnessing different things. And so to create these spaces where we can have that is really important to provide opportunities for listening and bringing that to action. I won't belabor too much, but I do want to say that you'll just by participating today, you're going to get the follow-up email with the link to the video. And we'll also be sharing some resources on there. Marcus, do you want to share the slide deck with slide 12, and then we'll jump to 14 because we're at the end. But one of the things that we try to do always is share resources that we find within our community. I don't know if I blinked, but there we go. So Richard, can you tell a little bit about these resources that you had pulled?
Yes, so these resources, and I'm going to add the link here in the chat. They're from our Career Center here at USD. So I didn't click into each one, but these are some of the tools that we have that will help us bring about some of the change that we want to see. There's these are different groups and some different activities that go on. So I encourage everyone to please check those out. And as I said, I put the link in the chat here so everyone can click on it and go through and see if any of these outlines could help you in having some of those crucial conversations that we've been having today as well. So.
And if anyone does have any other, if you want to skip to the next one, any other resources, and you email them to Marcus or Richard, if you too want to put your email addresses in the chat as well, then when we do send the follow-up email, we'll make sure to include those resources. we're really excited to share about our spring series. One of them is actually going to be in person. We do not know which one, but if you would like to sign up so that you can make sure that you're registered. The picture that's on this flyer is actually from Amir Sadiq, who he presented at one of our past events. And so you can go to the website and check out the different events that we had there, our YouTube channel, and go and see some of these things. But in the spring, in February, we're going to be talking about the impact of community, calling out and calling in, which is something that we have talked about in here today. And then in March, we're going to be examining healing and critical race theory. So once again, it's an extension of the work that we've started today. If you can give feedback on this event, or if you'd like to participate in being a facilitator, or you have a really good person who you'd like to suggest that we bring into this, into these rooms and into this conversation, you can do that on the feedback form, and I put the link into the chat. And then also the registrations for both the February and the March events. From the bottom of my heart, thank you all so much for being here. It is absolutely powerful, exciting, and inspirational to be able to join everybody in these rooms and continue to do this work together. So thank you very, very much. And we are all finished. And I know some people have to jump off because we've got another PhD meeting. So, all right.